It is time for StreetWise with former chief of the New York City Sheriff's Department, former chief of the Seagate Police Department, retired New York City detective, Time Warner Public Access Media Award, Joe Franklin Super Excellence in Broadcasting Memory Lane Award, New York Veteran Police Association StreetWise Productions, host of StreetWise, Mr. Lou Telano.
Good evening, and welcome back to StreetWise. This is Lou Telano. Boy, do I have a dynamite show this evening. I was going to have a third guest, but he couldn't make it, and that's Burgess Owens. He got a last-minute call to an important political event. As we know, he's running for Congress in Utah in the 4th Congressional District. And by the way, we need Burgess there. He is a man of integrity. He believes in God, country, family, and like my guest, he has Judeo-Christian values. I'm sorry he couldn't make it, but it'd be great for an upcoming Christmas show, and I can call it The Three Wise Men. Anyway, Burgess, good luck, and I'm going to introduce my guests now. My guests, they need no introduction, but I have to. Obviously, I have to. You see them on pretty much as major contributors on these talk shows. They have such amazing background. They're so politically astute, and I like about them, they're gentlemen. And I hope you guys heard me when I said if we had Burgess on, I'd be a Christmas show. I'd have on the Three Wise Men. So, okay. Anyway, by the way, I got to thank them for coming back to Streetwise. They're not strangers to my show, and it's a pleasure to have them. My, I don't want to say first guest, but I'll have to do it this way for some reason because it's on my left side. Peter Kirsanow, he's an attorney, labor practice attorney from Cleveland, Ohio. Great job he had. He was a civil rights appointed commissioner of George W. Bush, and he's still a member of a civil rights, I guess you call it, commission. And he's got a couple of great books out, Second Strike and Target Omega, but we'll talk about that in a minute. My second great gifts, oh my God, it is a gift, by the way, they both are gifts. Vince Ellison, he's also a TV contributor like Peter, and what I like about him is because we have a little experience. In my time when I started in law enforcement, I was in correction, and so was Vince Ellison. So we have a little something in common there. But also, great book, great TV commentator, contributor. I want to welcome Vince Ellison and Peter Kirsanow to Streetwise.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Yeah. Let me say this. Oh, are you anxious for Tuesday night like I am?
Oh, I can't wait.
You can't wait. You know, what did we say last time? We were going to bring the popcorn or something? Do you think
it's going to be a lot of fun? I'm hopeful, though, that, we haven't set the bar too low for Joe Biden. Everyone expects him to do very poorly, and if he just shows up, the press is going to say that, he was the greatest orator since Cicero or something, So, and I also think that it doesn't, Trump has been talking about semi-facetiously having him do a drug test. But remember this, we've seen Joe Biden in his natural habitat, and he's barely able to get a few words out without making a huge gaffe. But during the Bernie Sanders debate, a different Joe Biden showed up. He looked alert. He looked like he could put together a couple sentences, that he actually knew where he was. So you never know. You don't know who's going to show up.
Yeah, you don't know which the real Joe Biden will show up. But that was a couple of years ago, a few years back, and there's been some changes in his life. I mean, obviously, but maybe it's on steroids. We'll find out. What's your thoughts on that, Vince?
Well, I'm definitely happy to be here with you tonight, and I'm happy to be with Peter also. He's a gentleman and he's a scholar. Joe Biden, I hope that Donald Trump will remind America about who he is, because I'm sure that the press will not do it, even if it is Mike Wallace or his son. Joe Biden has to be held accountable for the things he's done in the past, especially to the Black community. The crime bill, If you don't vote for him, you ain't black.
Yeah.
We've all agreed that we shouldn't use gender or race to determine who receives anything here in America. We believe in merit and merit only. Joe Biden goes out and lets 100 liberal black men shake him down, telling him that if he doesn't pick a black woman, that they were going to destroy his campaign. People need to understand that if Joe Biden can't stand up to P. Diddy and Jay-Z, how are they going to stand up to Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, right? So I hope Trump reminds the American people of how weak he is and how racist he is and how he's done so much damage in his 40, almost 50 years in public service to the black community, in particular, and to America in general. I mean, it's so much stuff to hit him with. And again, he's been given a pass over the last year during this campaign by the press. They will not set him down and ask him these hard questions about all of the dirty, mean, racist, low-down things he's done to the black community. Killing school choice, expanding abortion up to the 9th month, putting black people on government health care that has pressed the black community into being basically the most unhealthy community in the civilized world. The crime bill, allowing illegals to come in and take jobs in space and bring drugs into the community. Everything that is wrong with the black community, you can trace back to the votes of Joe Biden, and everything that's wrong with America, you can trace back to him also.
Well, you can trace it back to the Democratic Party because clearly in your book, Iron Triangle, you mentioned the Democratic Party, how they attempt to divide the country either racially or by political or even through religion. It's in your book, and you talk about that. You know, what's your thoughts on that, Peter? On the Democrats? I'm asking you. I should ask you your thoughts on if the Democrats, like Vince has in his book, have an attempt to divide the country, even if it's and they don't care the result of what happens, how they do that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really improve, Lou, on what Vince had to say. I concur with it entirely. You know, look, I've always used to say that the Democratic Party has been engaged in the greatest act of historical jujitsu we've ever seen, because they started out as the party of, well, let me back up. One time about 15 years ago, I was at a debate at USC Law School. Had to do with racial preferences and affirmative action. Long story short is, after the debate, many of the black law students came up to me and said, "We've never heard what you said before. This is really amazing, but how can we as blacks give any credence to what conservatives or Republicans have to say?" And I was stunned by that, because these are law students, which means that they went through at least 12 years of K through 12, right? They went through probably 4 years of college, and, you know, they were first, second, or third year law students, but they believed that the Republican Party was adverse to blacks. And I responded by simply saying that, you know, it wasn't the Republican Party that opposed the Emancipation Proclamation. It was the Republican Party that opposed the 1867 Civil Rights Act, or any of the Civil Rights Act of the 1860s, or Teddy Roosevelt's anti-lynching legislation, or the 1957 Civil Rights Act, or the 64 Civil Rights Act, or the 65 voting rights, or the 68 Housing Act. The Republican Party was not the party of Jim Crow. George Wallace, Lester Maddox, Orville Faubus were not Republicans.
That's right.
And you can go on and on and on. It was always the Democrats who were oppressing blacks throughout history. And now they're doing it by simply saying, "Oh, we're for you. We will give you all these programs, all this money," which is nothing more than holding blacks down in servitude, in debt to a government program, as opposed to advancing in the manner which Donald Trump is doing.
Right.
That is giving people good jobs, the lowest unemployment rate among blacks in history.
Many years. Now,
the highest median income rate in history. For coronavirus, which apparently a lot of people think Trump was in some lab and created himself. Before coronavirus, there was 7 million, that's with an M, million more blacks employed than under Barack Obama.
Right.
Strike that, 7 million fewer blacks on food stamps than under Barack Obama, and millions more blacks employed than under Barack Obama. Yet the Democrats and the media, but I repeat myself, lionize Obama and trash Donald Trump.
Well, you touched the. I don't understand why, like, the black community doesn't realize that the Democratic Party was the party of slavery, the party of the KKK, the party of lynching. I can't, Abraham Lincoln. We could keep going, but I know Bob Woodson, which you guys know. Woodson Center, 1776, when he was my guest. So last month, he said, the Democrats bamboozle, hoodwinked, and con the black community for decades. Again, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, I think it's kind of obvious, and yet for some reason, the black community does get conned by the Democrats. I mean,
well, that's what my book talks about. It talks about
right.
how it's done, and that's why I call it the Iron Triangle. After working in the penitentiary for 5 years, I figured out that we had 3 entities in the black community that was making money off of the chaos. Most black preachers, most black civic organizers, and most black politicians. And these guys are conduits and contractors, and they get paid by rich white liberals to one end. And that is to make sure that the black community votes 90% for the Democratic Party. When you look at Al Sharpton, you look at Jesse Jackson, the NAACP, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and then most of the black Democrat politicians, they have a hammerlock control on the black community. You're not going to see a lot of rich white Democrats or Republicans down in those black communities. They're going to send their greasy politicians, their greasy preachers, and a lot of those street hustlers down there to get the vote for them. And we've always had this. It's just a variation on a theme. You've always had that kind of house Negro class that kept the field slaves in hand. And this is just the 21st century version of it. And it's hard to break, but they deflect very well. So what they do is they tell black people, since the GOP isn't down there, and there's an old vaudevillian term, 90% of any gig is just showing up. And the conservatives and the GOP just doesn't show up. If you go to all of these 50 districts, I bet you if you go to all of them that are majority black districts, if you go to all of them and ask that Republican how much money the RNC is giving him to run for office, I bet he can barely make gas money. Wow. But if you go there and talk to those black politicians, it's raining cash on them from the DNC. And so because for the last 30 or 40 years, they've heard nothing but one side of the story. It's hard to get the truth when there's no one down there to bring it to you. You know, how can you hear without a preacher, right?
You're right.
So you'll have Jim Clyburn in South Carolina with $10 million in the bank going around the 6 districts saying that Republicans are racist, Republicans hate black people, that they want to take a school choice, they want to take all the money, give to their children, that they want to lock you up, that if you get around them, they'll kill you. And they believe these people because these people have credibility, from the undertaker to the doctor. And that's how they keep that control. And it's through this iron triangle. And my book exposes the iron triangle and tells us how to break it and how to defeat them. And once we break them, then we can talk to them directly. And Donald Trump is the first Republican that has talked to the black community since Abraham Lincoln went to them in Richmond in 1865. And that's why he's going to get more of the black vote than any president since Lincoln.
Peter Kirsanow, now what Vince was just talking about, how the Democrats accused the Republican Party of racism and all that stuff. As the former head of the Commission on Civil Rights, have you seen, systematic racism, Peter? Or have you ever investigated?
I've been on the Civil Rights Commission for almost 20 years. I'm the longest serving member of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights.
Right.
And I keep hearing this term systemic racism over and over again. Today I heard it. Yesterday, if you were watching any of the football games, sometimes beforehand, there would be a little speech given by somebody about how we must vanquish systemic racism. In a nation of 330 million people, there's going to be racists. That's just the odds. They're going to be racists. But it's not 1965 Selma, Alabama anymore. I'm looking for the systemic racism. I want someone to tell me with facts that there's systemic racism. I will watch many of these TV shows where people just blithely talk about systemic racism, but no reporter ever follows up and says, give me an example.
Right.
I would like them to do that and then watch the hilarity ensue, because they will not be able to give you one except for one. There is one startling example of systemic racism, and it occurs in higher education, in the admissions process in most prestigious colleges, law schools, medical schools. Blacks are favored. Systemic racism helps Blacks and Hispanics over Asians and whites. I mean, at least ostensibly it helps, because the
Right.
problem is Blacks with lower qualifications are given a boost to get into higher quality schools over whites and Asians. But once they're there, because they're poorly prepared to compete at that level, not that they can't do it, but they're poorly prepared to compete at that level, they have a much higher rate of lower GPA and flunking out. But the systemic racism, if there's anyone, is in higher education. But find it anywhere else. Right now, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, back when Freddie Gray, Michael Brown, all these incidences occurred, there was the allegation of systemic racism in law enforcement. Again, in a nation of 330 million with hundreds of thousands of cops, will there be racist cops? Yes, but there's no systemic racism of any nature, and it's been that way. I mean, there hasn't been any systemic racism for nearly 40, 50 years.
Easy,
but no one is correcting the record. The media, Democrats, a lot of our institutions are simply going along with this presumption that there must be systemic racism, that any disparity between Blacks, whites, Asians, and Hispanics must be due to systemic racism. You will not see any elements of systemic racism. We haven't seen any yet. I'm still waiting for it. In the George Floyd incident, in the Breonna Taylor incident,
right.
We saw it in the Michael Brown incident when everyone kept saying, he said, hands up, don't shoot, right? We know that was false.
Correct.
Even Obama's Justice Department says didn't occur. But people are being hurt. We've got $2 billion worth of property damage due to rioting after the George Floyd incident. And we're getting cops that are being targeted for assassination as a result of this false narrative. This is serious stuff.
Absolutely. You mentioned Breonna Taylor. I just want to touch on that, guys. I'm going to touch on that because on Breonna Taylor case, there's so many things that's forgotten. By the way, Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal, they got a little in trouble, the NBA legends, because they were saying, hey, what'd you expect? Her boyfriend shot a cop. She shot. So what do you expect for them to do? And they took heat for that. But I want to go a little deep into that because from my personal experience, because I've done undercover plainclothes work and no-knock warrants, by the way. With the no-knock warrant, I think that they had a no-knock warrant, so they didn't have to introduce themselves as police officers, but they did. I think they did that so this is why they can offset the allegation. Well, we thought they were gangsters, hoodlums trying to come in and stick us up. So they introduced themselves as police officers. This is heavy. This is what I said at a little. I was invited to talk about this at some event recently. This is heavy. I said what I think, and by experience, I said I think that Breonna Taylor's boyfriend used her as a shield. And I'll tell you why. He shoots a cop. She gets shot 6 times. He doesn't get shot at all. And the cop that shot up the place, who got reckless endangerment charges, I think I know what he did. He couldn't get to the shooter because Breonna Taylor was in the way. So he tried to, which I did try to find a better position to target the shooter. That's just my, as former detective, analogy of it. But they made it into a whole big, like you guys said, they made it into a whole big racial thing that they came in and they shot a girl because she was African American in a bed. And like the George Floyd case, it's just the cop is wrong. We all know that. I mean, you couldn't miss it. We all, I don't know anybody who can agree with this guy locked up for murder. We all know that. But the after effects by Black Lives Matter Incorporated is really hurting the country.
Well, Black Lives Matter should be called Burn, Loot, and Murder, BLM. That's what they do. And back to what Peter's point and also your point, I think that your analysis is very, like you say, that's deep, it's mind blowing. But you've been doing this for decades, and I'll listen to anything you say about that. It sounds right. When you start talking about systemic racism here in America, if it is systemic racism, it comes from the Democrat Party.
Yes.
Because they live, breathe, and sleep it. From 1800 to 1860, they had the overseer's whip. From 1860 to 1865, Civil War, to try to keep their black people in line. And then during Reconstruction, we know the story: rape, murder, kill, whatever, to make sure that they violate the rights of free men. And after Reconstruction, you had 100 years of Jim Crow, where they systematically broke the law every single solitary day in the worst ways to make sure that they kept black people under their feet. And after the Civil Rights Movement, what did they do? They started aborting babies. They had riots every year in America. The Democratic Party has been in charge of every big city and have caused every riot over the past 60 years in America, and they've always used race. They either used it and they've always used it to keep black people in line. So when you start talking about systematic racism, and now they're talking about this voter fraud thing, I have to remind people that the 1965 Voting Rights Act was enacted to prevent Southern Democrats, from continuing voter fraud, voter intimidation through lynchings, murder, beatings, poll taxes. Peter knows all about this. The 1965 Voting Rights Act was designed to stop Southern Democrats from doing the stuff that they still do today. And you've never had to do that about Republicans. Democrats have done this in the South and in the big cities. They've always been the most violent, reckless, murderous, evil party that has walked the face of the earth. And they have this system in their party where the worst people in the world matriculate up to the top. And the leadership of this party are just beasts that walk the earth with human feet. And we have to recognize them for who they are. And as we look at their past and understand that since their inception, they've been responsible for over 60 million American deaths when you count abortion and slavery and civil war. The Democrat Party.
So how do we get the black community to recognize? How do we get the black community, Peter Kirsanow? How do we get the black community to recognize that? How do we do that?
Yeah,
That's not easy.
There are a couple of things to do. First of all, you need to read books like Vince's, but among other things, I think it's starting to happen. Before we get into how you get to do it,
right?
It's actually starting to happen. If you take a look at certain polling data, typically over the last 60 years, the Democratic candidate for president gets approximately 90 to 92% of the black vote. Okay.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton got 92% of the black vote. She still lost because there were 4 million fewer black voters that came out. So in other words, unless the Democratic presidential candidate gets approximately 90 to 92% of the black vote, and that black vote is a robust turnout, they cannot win. And that's why, as Vince said, they try to gin up the black vote by creating hysteria.
Yes.
Every cycle, you keep seeing the same ads. As Vince indicated, look, I've been living in inner city Cleveland in the same neighborhood for 40 years. Only once in that 40-year period did the Republicans even bother to campaign. It's the first time I ever saw a yard sign. They had George Bush's name on there in 2004. And when they did that, the share of the black vote for George Bush increased by 100%, not 2%, not 5%.
Wow.
Just like you said, 90% of life is showing up, but Republicans rarely show up in black neighborhoods. They cede it to the Democratic Party, a huge mistake, which Donald Trump has been rectifying. As a result, if you look at some of the current polling data, Donald Trump's approval rating, it's astonishing, frankly. It seems low, but for a Republican, it's extremely high. Donald Trump approval rating is around 26% right now, okay? And if you look at how that translates, if the Republican candidate has an approval rating of 26% in the September and October polls, he usually gets 75% of that last approval rating as his final vote in November. So that would put Donald Trump at about 18% of the black vote. That means landslide territory.
Yes.
Now, I know, George, Joe Biden is leading in the polls right now. I am highly skeptical of the accuracy of those polls.
Me too.
In addition to which, as we know,
Right.
Trump is doing spectacularly well in comparison to where he was in 2016 with the Hispanic vote. So how is it that he's improving in these discrete categories, but is behind? In other words, Joe Biden is doing worse among Hispanics and blacks than Hillary Clinton did, and Hillary Clinton lost. And for the life of me, I cannot believe that anybody who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 is going to change their mind. There were a lot of reluctant Trump voters in 2016 because they didn't know who he was. They didn't necessarily trust that he was a conservative. But now they know who he was. They voted reluctantly, but now they'll walk over hot coals to vote for him.
Yeah.
But again, going back to the black vote and how you get more of it, you do what Donald Trump has done. You go unabashedly to the black community and speak plainly to the black community, not in these code words and not also in an apologetic term that Republicans have been doing for such a long time, as if to concede that they are in fact racists, as the Democrats have claimed. Right. No, Donald Trump knows precisely who he is. He knows he's not racist. He speaks like a plain-spoken man to blacks, and especially among black males appreciate that, and they get it. And I think he increases his share of the black vote.
Well, people know when they're being patronized, that's for sure.
Right.
You know, it's, and you know, that's, I could tell you about Donald Trump, you know, I was helping, working with Ed Koch when he was the mayor of the city of New York, and I happened to be, I didn't know Donald Trump at the time. I mean, I knew of him, of course, most people did know him, and I overheard the conversation with former Mayor Ed Koch and Donald Trump, and Donald Trump says to Ed Koch, what the heck's going on with this woman's skating rink in Central Park? Because the skating rink in Central Park was predominantly for the kids from Spanish Harlem and African-American Harlem. The park is closed. The skating rink is closed in Central Park. Ed says, I can't afford it. If your city don't have the money. You know what he said? Well, I was standing, and I always talk about this. He says, hey, Ed, get it done. Give me the check. Who knows that? 30 years ago, at least, he wasn't looking to run for president 30 years ago. Right. So people don't know little things like that. So, and he's like you said, he's a regular. He happens to be. When my organization endorsed him, New York Veteran Police, I was fortunate enough to be with him for 25 minutes discussing law enforcement, law and order, things like that. He made me feel like I knew him all my life. He made me feel so comfortable. And he says, wow, this guy is amazing. You know, he's just, you would think you knew him for 20 years. When he, introduction, when I was sitting down, he says, hey, Lou, don't get up. So I says, no, I'm going to get up. You know, I don't want you to look down at me. So he taps me on the shoulder. Oh, you look like you're in good shape, and the whole thing. What do you think? And he says to me, what do you think was going on with law enforcement? So we did talk about that. But my point is, he's a regular guy. He is a regular guy, which Joe Biden has no background and the Democrats. I don't know who's regular in there, especially not Joe Biden. So,
Lou, can I follow up on that? Really quickly?
Absolutely, you can.
Of course. Similar to an experience I had.
Yeah.
I didn't know Donald Trump at all before the election. Never met him. I was skeptical, frankly, because here's this, billionaire from New York. He claims he's conservative. All these things. I don't know. I just know that I wasn't going to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Right.
A week after the election, I get a phone call asking me to meet with Donald Trump. And I went to Bedminster and met with him. I won't tell you the details of the meeting. I was being interviewed to be Secretary of Labor.
Right.
But I came back from that meeting and I told my wife, I said, this is not an ordinary human being. I rarely say things like that. He made me feel incredibly comfortable. More importantly, I know a little bit about labor law. I've been practicing labor law for 4 decades. I've been a member of the National Labor Relations Board. I teach labor law. There are certain aspects of labor law that if you're first exposed to it, it's going to take, somebody a little bit of time to absorb. He picked up on it immediately, grasped it immediately. I was stunned. But more importantly, they keep saying Donald Trump, he's a racist. He's racist this. They mischaracterized, for example, what he said in Charlottesville. It's a complete lie. I have to tell you, I won't tell you any details, but in my meeting with him, it became abundantly clear. One of the things he asked, as far as being Secretary of Labor, is his chief objective, his chief concern was the unemployment rate in the Black community.
Wow.
And he made it his his personal mission to rectify the unemployment rate in the Black community and institute policies and practices to do just that. And he was successful in just 2 years, bringing the Black unemployment rate to the lowest level in history, median income rates to the highest level in history. If he's a racist, he's the most incompetent racist in the world.
That's why they hate him.
I don't think he knows. That's a good
That's
point.
completely why they hate him, because they know he'll do stuff like that. And once he gets the Black people off the plantation, they will not be going back.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party cannot exist without the Black vote. And and this is why they're going so strong for it now, as you see. This is why they got Kamala Harris. This is why you see them spending so much money in the Black community. This is why you see them doing this Black crystal knock right now, where they're sending BLM and Antifa in, burning down Black stores, destroying Black shops. It's what they did in the 60s. Before 1960, when Black people were sharecroppers, and if a Black family tried to move off of the plantation and get their own farm, the white Democrats would come and they would poison the mule. They burn the crops. They burn the barn, because they had to put them back on the plantation. Because if one got off, the rest might go. And if all of them got off, who was going to pick the cotton? And how was the white plantation owner, the white Democrat plantation owner, going to survive? He needed his Black servants, and they still need us today. We are not allowed to get away. They have to use our babies to abort them so they can sell the body parts and make money. They have to monetize our children in the public educational system. Each one is about $25,000 in Washington, D.C. Whether they educate him or not, they get paid. They have to use it for social service money, food stamps, housing, you name it. They monetize us, and then they put them in prison, or they kill them.
Obviously,
that's all they've ever done to Black people, and that's all they're going to do.
Yeah, obviously they take the Black community for granted, but this time they're, like you had just mentioned a moment ago, they're concerned. But I like what you said a moment ago, Vincent, because you were born on a plantation in Tennessee.
Yes.
Right? So I got to ask, how did it feel to be born on a plantation in Tennessee? I like what you say, because you said, nobody gave me freedom. I was born free, and the man upstairs, maybe a woman, made me free. So can you elaborate on that for the?
It's this thing that I heard when I was growing up. You know, I had an epiphany when Kaepernick and all these guys were kneeling, and I was wondering what they were so mad about, because my life was harder than theirs. And I was listening to Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, "I Have a Dream," and I saw a poison pill in that speech, where because these children have been brought up to revere this speech, and I heard Dr. King say in this speech, 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, the Negro is still not free. And I knew that not to be true, because according to John Locke in the Second Treatise of Government, freedom is an unalienable right given you by God. Thomas Jefferson used that in his Declaration of Independence. It's an unalienable right. Now, an unalienable right isn't just given you by God. An unalienable right is irrevocable, it is non-transferable, and it is unsellable.
Beautiful.
Government cannot give it to you, and government cannot take it away from you.
Beautiful.
It is yours. It is yours. So when he said that we were not free, that was not true, because I was born free. I asked my daddy. He said, "Yeah, boy, you was born free." And freedom is something that you exercise. Abraham Lincoln gave this riddle. He said, if you tell a sheep that he has, if you tell a sheep that his leg is a tail, how many legs does he still have? The guy said 5. Lincoln said, no, he only has 4, because he won't know it. The same thing about freedom. If you don't know you're free, if you don't believe it, you're not. But it's an illusion, because all you have to do is grab it. So when you see these young men walking around saying that they're not free, these idiots don't know that they are free. When they walk around saying that they have to get white people to affirm who they are by saying white privilege, no justice, no peace, white supremacy, that's all in their mind. Because I can tell you right now, Lou, and you and I both can agree with this, there's no man superior to me. There's no man superior to you. There's no man superior to Peter. We all see each other as equals. And if I see you as superior to me, I myself am telling you that I am inferior.
Well, I don't know.
I am a child of God.
I don't know what white.
I
don't know what supremacy is, because I've worked 2 jobs. Got married young, and I don't have a problem telling the story, because I was a shoeshine boy in New York at 9, 10 years old. I had my little shoeshine box on Times Square. I used to shine shoes, and then years later, I'm standing on the same corner of 8th Avenue and 42nd Street as the chief of the New York City Sheriff's Department with Rudy Giuliani, because the Sheriff's Department does this, not the police department, closing down all those X-rated drug dealing, pedophilia places, which is back, by the way, because of Mayor de Blasio. So who would think in this country, as a poor kid born, living in a tenement building, Lower East Side, that someday I'd be standing on that corner with the mayor of the city of New York, closing down all these places that my parents were against. This is what America's all about. And
That's America.
I try to talk about them. They say, well, Lou, you had white privilege. I don't know what white privilege is. I got to pay mortgage. I got to pay bills. I work 2 jobs. I don't know what that white privilege is.
That's offensive to you, Lou. That's offensive.
It's
offensive.
It's exactly offensive the way the Democrats patronize the African American community, because they actually talk down to people. That's the way I look at it. And you guys could follow up on that. Whoever.
Well, Lou, I have this word that I want you to coin and use. I call it the betacrat. BETA, like the beta male.
Right.
And the betacrat is a man that's allowed himself to be socially and psychologically castrated.
Wow.
He wants government to see a man's manliness comes from defending himself, taking care of his family, providing for his family, loving his family, providing spiritual indoctrination to his family. But the betacrat allows government to do that in his stead. He's found it too difficult. So he's violent. He's a predator. He's a victim. He cries. He burns buildings. But he won't do what me, you, and Peter do every day and go out there and get it.
I know.
See, we're hunters. And the opposite of this betacrat is the alpha conservative. This is what we are. We're hunters. We take care of our families. We love our wives. We pray to our God.
You're right.
We defend ourselves and our property, and we defend our country. So we need to start calling these sissy men betacrats, because that's the Democratic Party produces these guys, and the black community is full of them, because when they ran the black father out of the house, they then allowed the public education system to take these men, make victims out of them, and now they all sitting there fat on government cheese with Obama phones burning up their grandmother's neighborhoods. They're a bunch of beta men, and they don't even know what manliness is.
Oh, boy. I want to touch on what you mentioned before. We talked about the Black Lives Matter. Supposedly, it's a decentralized political and social movement advocating for nonviolence. I don't know about that. And civil disobedience, which is what we're seeing now with their partner, Antifa, and incidents, especially on police brutality and all racially motivated violence against black people. And speaking of that, Kamala Harris said, I have it here somewhere, that she says we need Black Lives Matter. They're very important and essential. She's going to be she wants to be our vice president. I want to touch on that a little more in a different sense. You've mentioned there are people and Peter touched on it before, certain colleges, if you go into a certain class, you do have white privilege because you got the money, That's how I look at it. Former mayor of the city of New York he is in Florida, putting, $32 million or $32,000 to release thousands of inmates so they can come out and vote Democrat. Peter Kirsanow, as an attorney, is that criminal?
Well, it depends on how he's doing it. It is unlawful to provide something of value to someone in order to vote a certain way. And if he is providing money for these individuals either to be released or somehow to get them to vote a certain way, that is unlawful. So I think that's at least something that raises the issue. And, he's not doing this out of the charity of his own heart or anything of that nature. It's coinciding with this election. He's made it explicit as to what he's trying to do. So I don't know if anyone's going to take any action, but again, you may not pay somebody for a vote. You can't say that. I mean, that's a bribe.
It's bribery.
You can't say, here's $10, go vote for Donald Trump. That's unlawful. And on a broader scale, the question is that what Bloomberg is doing in this case? And there's some people who are saying that, that may be unlawful.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think so. But to me, that shows panic. That shows they're frightened. All these
Yeah,
different.
again, going back to Florida. Florida, obviously, major swing state.
Yeah.
Trump won it. He won many of these states narrowly. I think that despite what the polls are saying, well, let me back up. I think, as I said earlier, that it is incomprehensible how we can come to the conclusion that Joe Biden is leading Donald Trump nationally in the polls. He may do so because he may have, California and New York in terms of the popular vote. But when Donald Trump has expanded his margin over 2016 among blacks, Hispanics, among women, and then when you look at the growing cohort of people who refuse to tell pollsters what they're going to do. And sometimes they don't just refuse, they give them misinformation.
Correct.
There is polling data, there's some data that shows that up to 1/3 of conservative voters either don't respond to polls or respond falsely to polls. So those polls are not accurately capturing what's going on here. So if you look at, some of these swing states, these narrow states, I think that Trump is going to do extremely well and retain Florida, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, some of the swing states that he got in 2016. But I also think there's a fair probability that he gets, in addition to that, Minnesota and Nevada. And again, in addition to those swing states that he got, or the blue firewall states that he got in 2016, because he's expanding his pool of potential voters. And Biden, on the other hand, first of all, he's not campaigning at all.
No.
The media is doing his campaigning for him,
Yes.
if he even understands that he's in the middle of a campaign. In contrast to my experience with Donald Trump, my experience with Joe Biden is precisely what we see right now. Before this election cycle, in the several times I testified before Joe Biden, I remember the first time I did so was approximately 20 years ago. And I came back and told some of my law partners, again, I didn't care about Biden versus anybody else. I never thought he was actually going to run for president. But I said this, and I hate saying this about people. I'm very circumspect about how I talk about or describe others, even if I disagree with them. But it was astonishing how dumb he was.
Yeah.
It was, and again, I don't mean to say that in a pejorative sense. I try to be respectful, but he's in this, aside from being in the Senate, he was dumb on a fundamental level. He didn't get certain things, and it wasn't simply a lack of preparedness, because sometimes some of these senators they're juggling 14 different hearings.
Yeah.
It may not be completely focused on this particular hearing of the subject matter. But this transcended that. This was a guy who simply couldn't process the information. That was 20 years ago, and we've seen what's happened. There's a clear cognitive decline, despite the fact that the mainstream press doesn't want to talk about it, won't ask him any questions about it, tries to coddle him. Everyone can see with their own eyes. It's astonishing that we have an entire party, a national party, that will foist this candidate on Americans. Can't they do better than this?
Unbelievable. Anyway, this is my purpose of my radio audience, Lou Telano, and I got Peter Kirsanow and Vince Ellison, two great guests. You've seen them on all the different various talk shows, and it's my honor to having a discussion with Peter Kirsanow and Vince Ellison this evening. Peter, I got to ask you this. With all the, I don't call them protests, I call them riots. With all these riots that are going around in the country, I like your second book, by the way, Target Omega. By the way, you have it. The first book is Second Strike. I like it too because it's a spy book, and that pretty much connects to to it being a correction officer of Vince, so you can relate. It's like a law enforcement thing, and it's. But your second book, how with all the riots that are going on in this country, how can we get this special black special forces that you put in there to get rid of all these riots that are going out in the city? How can we get a special group like that?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, the use of that type of operation domestically is prohibited under law. We can't do that under the No, but it's funny. My office is in downtown Cleveland, and the debate is going to be here tomorrow. So there are SWAT teams, Secret Service, and all these guys all over the place. And if you want to see some intimidating individuals, I mean, I'm in New York City a lot,
Right.
and New York City cops are some of the best cops in the world, and some of them can be pretty intimidating. With all due respect to them, and I'm not taking anything away from them, I'm looking at some of these guys I saw on the street today.
Yeah.
Some of these, I don't know who they are. I can't tell who they are, but these look like some serious operators, I got to tell you. And I know some special operations folks. These looks like some of the guys that you don't want to mess with.
Yeah.
I would love to see, just kind of, look, be kind of funny. You've probably seen in the last few weeks these Antifa folks who will sit down at an outdoor dining table with people and disrupt them.
Right.
And disrupt their dinners and things like that. I'd like to see them try that with some of these guys who are on the street of Cleveland right now in anticipation of the debate, because it's swarming with them. What I don't like is all of these blue city mayors and councils who are doing sheer insanity in either defunding the police or telling them to stand down, like in Portland and other places. The cops can do their job, and unfortunately, they're sitting there and they're sitting ducks. They are they're being targeted. We saw what happened in Los Angeles just a couple of weeks ago with those 2 cops that were shot.
Yeah.
As long as we continue to do this, perpetuate a false narrative of cops just shooting black people, as long as, and it's all in blue cities, the elected officials do not protect and defend their cops and let them do their jobs, we're going to have more riots, more people getting killed, and more attempted assassination of officers.
Because of that, what you just touched on, Peter Kirsanow, 27 chiefs of police throughout the country, in all Democratic jurisdictions, by the way, resigned, and half were African-American chiefs, male and female. You notice that. And in other words, they're saying, hey, we can't control it. We're not given the tools, or we're not given the authorization to stop it. I don't know. You talk about peaceful demonstration. First of all, there is no permit that'll allow you, even in a peaceful demonstration, to demonstrate at 3 a.m. anywhere. There's nowhere, it's during daylight hours, and you got to get a permit. Nobody has a permit to do this, but these are not peaceful demonstrations. These are riots. But you had touched on something. Because I'm close to them. Police, when I say they, I mean the law enforcement. They're reluctant. They have to sit there and stand there and take abuse. And you see it and you say, how the heck can they do it? Because if they react, they may, besides losing their job, they might even get locked up. This is what the Democrats, this is the result of the Democrats, because this is all Democratic cities. And I hope the people see it and realize it. If I was sitting there like you touched on with my wife or my daughter or anybody in your family, and they did this to me, I'd be in jail. I would definitely be in jail. So I think Antifa, they target their people when they do this, or obviously they have the numbers to intimidate people. I don't know how this is allowed, how it's permitted, and it's just mine. But I don't know if there's an answer. If you guys have an answer, I will gladly listen to it.
Take the shackles off the cops. That doesn't mean you let them go out there and engage in anything they want to. Cops, Lou, I'm preaching to the choir, I know, but 99% of cops are great individuals. Heck, you're going to find bad lawyers, bad doctors, bad Indian chiefs. But the fact of the matter is that most of them are doing their job. It's sheer insanity to shackle cops. And we've got $2 billion worth of property damage, a lot of people being killed. And here's one of the major problems in this defund the cops approach.
Yes.
Black Lives Matter and Antifa are the 2 principal organizations behind defund. Here's what happens. If you truly believe Black Lives Matter, then you want more cops. Because in the year after Michael Brown was killed, you had the Ferguson effect, and you had all these consent decrees that tied cops' hands, and some cities were telling cops to stand down. 1,800 more blacks were killed in the following year because of the increase in crime.
Yes.
That was in 2015 after Michael Brown.
Right.
That pales in comparison to what's going on right now. We've seen crime surges of not just 5 or 10%, but 300 and 400%
Wow,
after
amazing.
a 35-year decline in crime rates.
But so see, Peter, this is what they want.
Yep.
This is not a mistake. This is a plan. See, this is Marxism 101. First, you disarm the citizens. Then you defund the police.
Yeah.
Then when there's chaos, you send your brown shirts in to take order. And you find the choke points in all the major cities and you spread it to all the states. And there you have it. They know exactly what they're doing. These people aren't stupid. They might be evil, but they're not stupid. They've gone to Harvard, Yale, some of the best schools in the world. They have money. They're getting money from some of the most powerful people in the world because this is a plan. They know taking down the police is going to cause chaos. That's how you get power, through the chaos.
That's what they want.
You don't get power during times of peace. You get power during times of chaos. You know about the Russian Revolution and how they did it. Exactly. They came in, they took down the government, chaos, Lenin came in, bam. Hitler did the same thing in Germany. Chaos. People tearing up stuff, raising hell. They bought in a strong man. They got peace. There it is. They need the chaos before they can come in and take over. And first you disarm the population. And right now, if they've done nothing, they've helped the gun owners because close to 6 million people have gotten guns. And then they defund the police, and that's it. And now they enter their third step, bringing in the brown shirts.
Well, similar to defunding the police is there's no bail system. Nobody goes to jail. That's another reason why cops. That's another reason why cops are reluctant because nobody's going to jail. You know, that's another thing. They just automatically walk right out. Just the other day, I think it was yesterday, in fact, the FBI locked up this guy. It's the first time I've seen a name like this. He likes to be called Sir Major Page, 32 years old, Toledo, Ohio. He's the founder of the Black Lives Matter Greater Atlanta, and he was just arrested by the FBI he had a GoFundMe account, and he put in his pocket $470,000 for clothing and a lavish life. But he used the death of George Floyd to do this GoFundMe account, and $470,000 went in his pocket. So it's telling you, I think initially there were some people that felt they were sincere. They were sincere in their Black Matters concern, but now it's completely out of hand. I think just like the socialists hijacked the Democratic Party, there's this vicious terrorist group, I call them, that hijacked the initial Black Lives Matter concern. Who wants to? We got about 5 minutes. Anybody with who wants Vince? Peter want to touch on that?
I was debating Trayvon Martin's lawyer on Sean Hannity's show a while back in February, I think, of this year. And I told him about this show on House of Cards with Frank Underwood, the Machiavellian character on House of Cards, how he broke a teachers union strike. He sat there and he waited for a phone call one night, and he waited for about 5 or 6 calls, and he said, "That's it." And what Frank Underwood waited for was for a Black child to get shot. And when that Black child got shot, he then called a press conference and said, if this child had been in school, this would have never happened. And that broke the teacher strike. I told him, what you guys are going to do to get what you want, you're going to sit back and wait for the golden kill. What is that golden kill? For an unarmed Black man to get killed by a white man. And then you're going to take it and you're going to spread false information. And you're going to try to get the Black people in the fever pitch. And you're going to try to get them out to the polls based on fear. This is your stick. This is what you do. Back before 1960, it was N-word, N-word, N-word. Now it's white man, white man, white man. You have to divide Christians based on race to win. But if we ever come together, and this is how we win, we have to stop depending on the government to do what we're supposed to do as Christians. We're like liberals in this. We want the GOP to go and talk to the Black community for us. No. Jesus gave us a great commission. He said, spread this gospel. First in Judea and Samaria, and then throughout the othermost parts of the world. We'll go to Asia, we'll go to Africa, we'll go everywhere else, but we won't go across the street. And now it is on us. It's our job. And if we don't do it, it will not get done. These are our Christian brothers and sisters. They believe what we believe, but they think that we hate them. And we have to change their minds. And how do we do it? By showing up.
Yes, well, Peter was right. The Republicans relaxed on addressing the minority community, and I agree with that. I guess they got elite like they do in their senators and their congressmen. They're very comfortable. But it was a 1-year-old child. It's not the first time. Was shot in the stomach in Brooklyn a month ago, 2 months ago. And a lot of kids 8 years old are being shot in the streets in Chicago, and New York is sort of catching up. No demonstrations, no outbursts on that, nothing. And that's what bugs me. If you're going to protest, how about protesting these poor kids that can't make it to 12 years old in Chicago and New York? What's happening now? We got about 3 minutes, guys.
Lou, for the last 40 years, on average, approximately 5,200 blacks have been killed by homicide. 5,200 a year.
Whoa.
For 40 years. That's 250,000 people. But approximately 18 blacks are killed every year by cops. Some of those are done because they're justifiable. I mean,
Right.
these are people who are shooting at you.
Right.
But Black Lives Matter didn't show up when did they show up? 5 years ago. So for 35 of those 40 years,
Good point.
we've got 5,200 people on average being killed, but we didn't hear anything about a Black Lives Matter. Only Black lives that are killed by white cops appear to matter. This is extremely important. It's frustrating because, as we know, these organizations are getting hundreds of millions of dollars
They are.
from major corporations, from law firms, from
Yes.
all over the place. They are extremely well funded. They have cowed the media and major corporations and
Wow.
just about anybody with a voice into supporting them and not saying anything negative. And you look at, they've now scrubbed many of these principles, but if you look at their organizing principles, such as abolishment of the nuclear family and other organizing
Absolutely.
principles that are essentially
Yeah.
socialist,
I would
it's
just,
extraordinary.
I got 30 seconds. I just want to say, so it looks like only black criminal lives matter to this organization. That's what it appears to be, because there's no,
Well, that's what it is. I mean, the NAACP and Brown versus Board of Education,
yeah.
they provided they provided evidence in the dog test that,
Oh, boy.
to them proved that black people were inferior. They
Wow.
said it, not white people.
Guys,
and they believe it to this day.
we could use another hour, but we're out of time. It's my, I hopefully I can get you back again, in the near future. Vince Ellison and Peter Kirsanow, I thank you, for being.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lou. I appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
man.
We hope we
You're
can
a
bring
Stone
back.
Cold G, and I love it.
Yeah, I hope we can bring. I hope we can. Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope we can bring back a Judeo-Christian, and God bless America to you guys. Thank you.
They'll take care of all of it.
Thank you for being on Lou Telano show. And,
Bye-bye.
all right, folks, this is Lou Telano, and thanks for listening and watching Streetwise, and I'll catch you later.